In late October 2023, we lost a legend. Dr. Charles Hosler, whose pioneering efforts in broadcast meteorology led to Weather World, passed away at the age of 99. He had an illustrious career that spanned from the military and education to research and leadership. And he did it all with the intent of helping others.
Some days you know exactly what the weather's going to be and you can be 100% sure. Other days you're so-so. And I tried to convey that as part of the forecast, which was much appreciated.
A native of Honeybrook, Pennsylvania, Charlie Hosler didn't grow up wanting to be a meteorologist. In fact, it wasn't until his assignment in Guam during World War II that his fascination for weather developed.
And what we did, we got up at 5 in the morning and flew at 200 feet for 12 to 14 hours a day over the Pacific Ocean looking for easterly waves or typhoons. And if we found a typhoon, we had instructions to fly around it, at take 60 knots on the tail and fly around it. Of course, we had no radar, no electronic navigation, and so we've lots of times wound up right in the eye of the storm, flying right through the eye wall. We never came back with all 4 engines. We never came back with less than 2. So it was an exciting time. That's how I got into meteorology.
After the war, Hosler arrived at Penn State in 1946. At the time, meteorology was only a 2-person department. He went on to earn his bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degrees in meteorology, and then taught students how to draw weather maps and make weather forecasts.
Keep in mind, there were no computers at that time, there were no satellites, there was no radar. You simply had the surface observations and the balloon observations to get the structure of the atmosphere. So we were not in very good shape in terms of forecasting, but still, for the short term, for a day or so, we could do pretty well, and it was very useful. And it became obvious that not only was the military not utilizing the weather to the extent they should, but the society in general was not utilizing the weather forecast.
Part of the problem was that local forecasts were either incorrect or not available. Hosler focused on training skilled forecasters, which would go on to have a global impact.
We trained a lot of people who went out into the world and really made meteorology move, so that I can truthfully say that the heads of the weather services in Thailand, Indonesia, Liberia, Lebanon, Turkey, Ethiopia, all were trained here at Penn State. We had people from maybe 15 different nations. And since they had no weather service as such, these people went back and formed weather services.
Hosler's forecasts would gain the attention of Penn State University President Milton Eisenhower, and eventually his brother, the 34th President of the United States, who was to deliver the commencement address in 1955 at an outdoor ceremony.
So I was called down and had breakfast, shared a grapefruit with Dwight Eisenhower, and talked about the weather at D-Day and the D-Day forecast, and presented him with the weather map and what there'd be a window of a few hours when they could hold commencement outdoors, and everything worked out. I had a lucky forecast. And so Dwight Eisenhower became enamored with my forecast. And as a result, he never went anywhere without either he or Colonel Draper calling me to make sure the weather was okay. That was good for the meteorology department, the fact that I was sort of the local forecaster and got us publicity. And of course, the president knew we were here.
Hosler channeled the publicity and his motivations for a more informed public into inspiration for an innovative way of communicating weather information in 1957.
Well, let's go over to Dr. Charles Hosler, meteorologist here at Penn State, and see what's going to happen with the weather.
Well, it doesn't look like much change locally, but we're beginning to get a little excitement on the weather map down in the Gulf of Mexico. We've got our first hurricane of the season, Hurricane Audrey. And you'll see Audrey down here in the Gulf. Right now she's moseying up here very slowly northward. But it looks like from the flow aloft, you know, we have observations of the wind way up in the atmosphere, and that flow aloft goes like this.
After a few decades of meteorological and technological evolution, Hosler reflected back on those early broadcasts.
There's something wrong. The color television makes me look much older.
TV was pretty primitive then. Where did you do this?
It sure does. We did this in 20 Sparks building. It was all black and white equipment, and we were lucky if the cameras stayed on during the whole show or the microphones didn't get unplugged. And we have a much more sophisticated audience. And I think that was the reason we really started the program, was to raise the level of sophistication of the audience. And I think here in Pennsylvania, we have the best educated audience there is in the country, because they have 25 years of getting a little education along with the weather, and so they know a little better about how to interpret what they see.
Television became a springboard, not just for Hosler, but for the meteorology department at Penn State. His no-nonsense educational forecasts for central Pennsylvania led farmers to coin the phrase, "make hay with Hosler."
It became very popular, and as the department grew and I became busier, I was unable to get up at 6 in the morning and plot the weather maps and do all of that. And I mentioned that on TV one time, and the local farmers collected $1,725 and sent a check to the department asking if that would help. And so we bought a facsimile machine so I didn't have to plot the weather maps.
As the meteorology department grew and the weather broadcasts morphed into what would eventually become Weather World, Hosler continued to lead, serving in just about every academic capacity at Penn State. As professor and head of the Department of Meteorology, dean of the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences, senior vice president for research, and dean of the graduate school. He also held 3 presidential appointments in Washington, D.C., and served in leadership positions in the American Meteorological Society, World Meteorological Organization, and National Science Board. After kindly delaying his retirement multiple times, Hosler finally did so in 1992. But he was no stranger to Penn State or meteorology, frequently stopping by as a familiar face. Even through the summer of 2023, he was one of our biggest cheerleaders.
I think central Pennsylvania has the finest weather coverage of any area in the United States as a result of the contributions that Weather World is making.
Hosler left his mark on Penn State, Pennsylvania, and the field of meteorology. And not just physically, with an oak tree at the Arboretum and a campus building bearing his namesake, but in the myriad of minds that he inspired throughout his long life.
What are you most proud of when it comes to your time at Penn State?
Oh, I think that the greatest pride is like a parent with children is in the students we had. When you look at the generals who ran in the Air Weather Service, 3 heads of the National Weather Service who graduated from here, people who started businesses that were very successful, people had successful careers as professors, as teachers. That's the satisfaction. Whether these people ever remember who I was or not, I can take some vicarious pride in having played a small role in their development and making the facilities possible and the education possible for them to reach their real potential.